Hello everyone, we're going to play a review game called Guess the Molecule, and this is primarily going to be for Unit 1 of an AP Biology class. During this review game, I'm going to show you different molecules, and I'm going to show you how to figure out what that molecule actually is. Remember, there are 4 different types of macromolecules we're studying here. There are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. With that being said, let's just jump right into it. So here's our first molecule. You can see that it has this circle and then 2 of these kind of squiggly lines down here at the bottom. Now, as soon as I see this circle and 2 lines, I already know what it is. However, let's try to break this down a little bit further. You can see here where it says a hydrophilic head and a hydrophobic tail. So these are 2 parts of a molecule. They're going to be in the lipids classification. You can also see these squiggly lines down here. What they represent are carbons and hydrogens in this kind of like zigzag pattern. And these carbons and hydrogens in a straight chain make this region very nonpolar. That's why it's hydrophobic. It pushes against water because water again is polar. Now up here we can see this right here is a glycerol molecule, and this right here is a phosphate group. So we have a glycerol molecule, 2 fatty acids, and then a phosphate group. So that means this is going to be a phospholipid. Here's our next molecule. You can see that this is the phosphate group here that we talked about in our last slide. We also have this pentose sugar and then a nitrogenous base. So 2 key features here that we're looking at is that we have a phosphorus atom and we have nitrogen atoms. That means it can't be a carbohydrate or a lipid since those 2 don't have those elements. So we're down to proteins and nucleic acids. And this here is going to be our kind of defining part. You can see this phosphate group is going to be found in all nucleic acids. So we're now down to this group. This here is a nucleotide since we have the 3 parts, the sugar, the phosphate group, and the base. And you can see our answer here is correct. Here's our next molecule. It's a lot more simple than the previous 2. You can see we have this central carbon, we have this NH2 group, and we have this COOH group. Now, since it has this N in here, this nitrogen, we know it's automatically not a carbohydrate and not a lipid, since those 2 macromolecules don't have nitrogen. The whole structure here, you can see it also has 2 hydrogens on either side. This whole structure is very common to something called an amino acid. These amino acids are going to be the monomer of a protein. Let's double check to make sure we're right. Yep, we are correct. Here's our next molecule. You can see that it's mainly made of carbons, oxygen, and hydrogens. This means it can only be a lipid or a carbohydrate. So you can see this ring pattern that's going totally around here. It's kind of filled with carbons and this 1 oxygen. Whenever I see this ring pattern, I automatically think of a carbohydrate. So now we're down to the macromolecule. Well, what is this? This single ring is a sugar molecule or something called a monosaccharide. Let's double check to make sure we're right, and we are. Here's our next molecule. You can see that this is a little bit complex. It has these carbon rings which make you automatically think of a carbohydrate. However, we have to pause and make sure we're in the right grouping. So again, we only see carbons, we only see hydrogens, and we only see oxygen. So that means it can either be a lipid or a carbohydrate. These rings that are fused together are not like the rings that we saw in our last slide that show us the carbohydrate structure. You can see we have this 1, 2, 3, 4 style of rings that are fused together. That's going to be a type of lipid that's going to be called a steroid. These steroids are like messengers in our bodies, and they help communicate different signals throughout our different organs. And whenever we see this 1, 2, 3, 4 style of rings that are fused, I automatically know it's a steroid. Here's our next molecule. You can see that there are these kind of arrows in this molecule. You can see the arrows here, and you can see these little corkscrews. Whenever I see these corkscrews and these arrows, I automatically know what it is. These are proteins. And proteins have this globular structure. You can see it has like a little bit of a structure to it. So anytime I see these corkscrews or these arrows, I automatically know it's a protein. Let's double check our work, and it's right. All right, last 2 here. We can see again these phosphate groups in this molecule, and there are more than 1, so it's going to be many of a monomer. We can see this sugar molecule having a ring to it, and we can see these 4 bases that have nitrogen in them. You can see each one of these has nitrogen. So again, we know it's not a carbohydrate, we know it's not a lipid, it's either a nucleic acid or a protein. Proteins don't have all of these phosphate groups, so we're going to scratch that out. So we're down to nucleic acids. You can see we have a long chain of this molecule, and there's a U or a uracil in this, so this is going to be RNA. Let's double check our work. Yep, this is mRNA. Here's our last question, or our last molecule. So we have two of these ring structures with carbon, oxygen, and hydrogen. We don't see any nitrogen or phosphorus, so that means it can only be a lipid or a carbohydrate. The ring structures here that are bonded together make me think it's a carbohydrate. There's a lot more oxygen than that would be found in a lipid, so let's scratch that out. You can see the sucrose name here ends in ose. That means it's definitely a carbohydrate. And you can see here this ring and this ring put together. This is going to make it a sugar molecule, but a specific type of sugar molecule. This is going to be called a disaccharide or sucrose. This is the disaccharide.